this is Mike Mascia of Cadwalader. Thanks for tuning in to Fund Finance Friday Industry Conversations. A relatively stable week in fund finance. Our deal volume stayed really strong. We actually had more new matters open this week than our trailing 12-month weekly average. So we're super excited about that. Forward indicators look good as well. So feel like everything's steady in the market. Shout out to Julia Cohen of Simpson Thacher. She was named one of Law 360's Rising Stars this week. Julia does a lot of the deals for many of the top sponsors and always does a terrific job. So congrats to Julia. Also, Funds Finance Association this week announced that FFA University will go forward. It's going to be a virtual event this year on September 22nd. So more information to come on that, and registration will open in the next week or two. We've got a great edition, a couple of really good speakers today, so let's get started. Great, so first we have with us Alex Last and Alex Woodcock from Mourant to talk about the Cayman Islands new regulatory regime. Alex, thanks for joining us.
A pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. So I thought folks probably need a little bit of background just as a reminder. Tell us about the Cayman Islands Private Funds law and why it was enacted in the first place.
Sure. So the law was enacted in February and effectively introduces a regulatory regime for closed-ended funds. So for the first time, funds like private equity structures, funds which effectively operate on a capital drawdown model and don't allow investors to redeem, are now required to register with the regulator here. The main impact on the market, I think, is that effectively, because this is the first time these types of funds have had to register, the sponsors in the US and the users of Cayman vehicles have had to wrestle with what are the implications for them from a documentation perspective, from a timing perspective. Does this impact in any way on how they operate their business? And I think to a large extent, the answer to that is no, but we can dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, and what does it mean to have to register?
Well, that's a good question. So I think it's worth saying that it's been a work in progress. The registration process ostensibly is very simple. So it's an online application form which is completed by the fund sponsors, Cayman Islands Council or Cayman Islands Service Providers, effectively setting out core information relating to that fund, and also attaching certain key documents, so particular constitutional documents, any offering materials, for example. The process from that perspective, therefore, is relatively straightforward. One of the key operational changes here, which the law has imposed, is an obligation on funds that are now in scope to have local audit sign-off. So they're required to prepare annual accounts, and invariably most of these funds are already doing that. But the additional step here is that they need local audit sign-off. And so that's been an operational change which has meant that sponsors have had to reach out to service providers and put in place, sort of behind the scenes, the documents they would need in order to be able to complete the registration process. So I think there's two sort of stages to it. There's the actual physical process, and there's also collating the documents and having the conversations you need to have with the fund sponsor to be in a position to be able to make the filing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and what are the implications of the law for fund finance lenders?
Hi, Mike. Yes, so lenders should continue their analysis of their existing credit arrangements, because with the clarification in the law that was amended last week, there are now more entities in scope. So they should work with their Cayman Council and US Council or English Council and consider reaching out to the sponsor side to seek clarification whether those entities are in fact now in scope, especially for those credit agreements that have already been entered into. There'll now be an exercise to reach out and obtain confirmation that an application has been or is about to be submitted, and then thereafter obtain evidence of registration.
Mm-hmm. And with the amendment last week, what type additional entities are now scoped in, and kind of from a practical perspective, how many more entities in our existing deals need to register?
Well, that's a good question. I think in terms of sort of broad categories of the type of structures that are now in scope, I think from a fund finance perspective, probably the largest bucket are the AIVs. So I think generally speaking, an AIV that is sort of an outwardly facing pooling vehicle will now be in scope, whereas previously it wasn't. Master funds are another fund type which are now in scope, and potentially certain co-invest structures. So as Alex said, I think any lenders out there or sponsors, and I think it's important to sense here that both the lender side and the sponsor side are completely aligned on the compliance with law obligations here. So both sides need to reach out to counsel and just square away and make sure that the entities that are now in scope have and are being appropriately registered in time.
Yep. And the deadline, if I remember correctly, is August 7th. You know, are there any other expectations you guys have as to what's the next thing to happen in this analysis that would be relevant for a fund finance lender?
No, I think one thing that may provide some comfort is obviously the industry here has been working very, very hard with the regulator to try and streamline the registration process, because obviously from a lender perspective, there's been a huge amount of focus on making sure funds are actually registered, and so that's put a lot of pressure on that process. So the regulator here has been excellent in terms of engaging with the law firms and helping us look at ways in which we can potentially streamline that process. So, for example, there was a in relation to sort of newly in scope AIVs, which had covenants in their loan documents requiring pre-registration 30 days prior to implementation of the law. SEMA worked very hard and well with the industry here to create a streamlined process which enabled AIVs in that scenario, which were suddenly in scope and had those covenants to be able to register and comply.
Mm-hmm. And what's y'all's sense? I mean, when we get to August 7th, I mean, do you feel good that, you know, 99.9% of the funds are going to be registered and this isn't going to be a practical issue? Or, you know, do you have any forecasts of areas where you have a little more heartburn?
I think the sense is that people are making good progress. Obviously, the changing the definition has put a bit more pressure on it. But as I say, because of the way the industry is working to streamline that process, I think we're comfortable and confident that the funds that need to get registered will be able to get registered. And I think it's also worth making the point, and maybe this one Alex might chime in on a bit more as well, is just putting it into context, you know, from a lender perspective, because I think there is an important point there around just assessing what is the risk here, because you know does the whole world end on 7th of August? I don't think so, but Alex has got interesting thoughts on this, I think.
Sure. So under the law, after the 7th of August, funds have 21 days after the acceptance of capital commitments from investors to register with SEMA, and before being able to receive capital contributions. And there's a term under the law for the purposes of investments. There is a nuanced but perceived risk. It is open to interpretation in our view. were a lender seek to enforce security after the 7th of August, but before a fund has been registered, that there could technically be, well, there is a technical argument that the fund is not in compliance with the law. So question if an investor might have excused rights pursuant to documents such as its side letters. And even if an investor did contribute its capital in connection with a call made by a lender, would that capital contribution be deemed unenforceable? We are of the view that it was never the intention of the law such that it would affect the ability and the financial interests of not only the fund but the investors and the lenders, and there'd be it wouldn't be intended to deprive a lender of the ability to enforce its security. As I say, Cayman prides itself on being a creditor-friendly jurisdiction, and once again, everyone's interests are aligned on this.
Yeah, well, that certainly doesn't seem to me like it would be the right outcome from an equitable perspective. I mean, clearly, if the investor got the benefit of the investment that was acquired with the lender's loan being able to get out of its capital commitment on technicality, it doesn't seem like an equitable outcome. So hopefully that wouldn't be the case. However, let's get all these darn funds registered so we don't even have to worry about it, please.
Exactly. I think that's the key. I think everyone, as I say, everyone is completely aligned and probably completely sick of the private funds law. But I think it's as I think the key is, again, as I said at the beginning, everyone's interests here are aligned. You know, there's nobody that's arguing actually, no, well, you know, this isn't a good thing to register. Everyone wants to be in compliance with law for all different reasons. But I think that's an important point to take away. And as Alex, you know, the purpose of this law is not to impact on a lender's right to enforce. To a large extent, it's an administrative registration requirement. And I think, you know, it's just really important to put it in that context, I think.
Just also to add, for funds post 7th of August that launch, our expectation is that the credit agreement will have settled language on referencing the private funds law, and that the fund would register at launch or shortly thereafter, and it would be a condition to either on closing or subsequent that evidence of registration be provided. So yeah, the landscape post 7th of August is fairly well bedded down.
Yeah, excellent. Well, listen, thank you guys very much for making a couple minutes to visit with us and explain this so clearly. It's good to see you, if only on Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure. Nice to see you.
So next we have with us Terry Hatton, who runs the fund finance business at MUFG. Terry, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Mike. And yourself?
Yeah, doing great. I felt the last time I hung out with you, we were in Miami. It's been a long time.
Yeah, although, well, you didn't see me. We were down in Hilton Head together just a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
I think we were doing some big game fishing, and I was just sitting on the beach.
Excellent. Well, you usually commute every week to New York. How has the COVID disruption changed your game?
I guess it's changed it a lot. Obviously, I'm not going to New York to work anymore, and that's been a big change for me. I actually haven't spent this amount of time in Charlotte for, I don't know, since I arrived in Charlotte, probably 15 or 20 years ago. I'm not sure what the time frame is, but it's been a bit of an adjustment. I spend most of my time up at the lake house and just work from there, and it's very quiet, peaceful, so I actually get a lot of work done. I think what's happened here is the days, I'm sure for everybody, have become a lot longer. So we're starting earlier, working later in the day, that sort of thing. You like to think that you're just as efficient wherever you are, but the truth of the matter is it does help to be congregating in groups and discussing what transactions you're working on and that sort of thing. So I think it does have some impact in perhaps slowing us down a bit, but overall it's working out well.
Good. Well, my perception is you all have been super busy throughout the disruption. How are you guys approaching the market?
Great question, Mike. Well, look, we've been very active, and I think we've done about 20 billion in deals on a gross basis since December of 19. We've been very practical as we've gone along about ensuring that we have sufficient capacity to meet the needs of our clients going forward. And that translates to ensuring we have billions of dollars in capacity within my business in order to accommodate those needs. In addition, we've also gone through or are going through a process to ensure additional capital is flowing into this business to accommodate those needs. As you can imagine, any given bank is constantly shifting its focus if they want to be nimble at all, where credit is needed and where credit support is warranted. So this is one of those spots, and we expect that we'll be able to meet the ongoing needs. In terms of approaching the market overall, we think that there is a lot of business. We're not really approaching it any differently, although we are looking at the transactions more carefully and ensuring that we're using money wisely. Mike, we're very focused in on being a relationship bank and not just a transactional bank. And that's one of the big keys and emphasis that we have these days.
Great. So Terry, as we enter the second half of the year, how are you guys forecasting transaction volume?
Transaction volume, well, I guess whatever I need to do in order to meet my budgets is the easy answer. Look, Mike, I think that we're going to probably have to do about another 20 billion or more as we go along here. And I think that that volume is easily achievable in the current market. As I mentioned, there's more volume than really any bank or group of banks can handle. There are a lot of transactions out there. They're all good. They all warrant attention and support. So I'm not concerned about the actual volume or there being enough volume there. I'm confident that there will be. I think that what we need to do is just use our money wisely. I think that you'll see more of the originate to distribute model happening here rather than people just taking down large chunks. I think that that's really, you know, again, one of the game changers that we'll see going forward. And so what goes along with that is that the sponsors are going to have to give more business to other banks and not just concentrate their business with one or two.
Well, in early July, you closed what is the biggest transaction that I've seen so far in 2020, including putting together a 10-bank syndicate. I know some of this got to be confidential, but tell us what you can about that deal and the syndication process.
Sure. Look, it was a large transaction. It's the transaction that's really down the center of the fairway for us in terms of doing it. We have a big team of about 15, 16 people that are just dedicated to this business, Mike, and it works out well. The syndication team did a fantastic job. The deal came to us right around Memorial Day weekend, and unfortunately, everybody had to dig in that weekend. That was fine, but we banged out the term sheet, got moving forward on that, and we managed to close the transaction in about 5 weeks, and that included getting all the banks across the finish line to get it done. Big shout out to our syndication team led by Ryan Reardon, and because it was a monumental effort. There was, you know, everything thrown in, and there were some last minute machinations that again make it challenging, but those are the things you deal with. And I think we did a great job. It was done, I think, flawlessly in less than 5 weeks, start to finish.
Well, congrats on the deal. And it was also a validation, in my view, that the syndication market and the subscription business is still up and functioning. Hey, I want to switch gears with you a little bit. Zach Barnett was on with us last week, and one of the areas he talked about struggling to find lenders was for funds of one, SMAs, and other sort of high concentration transactions. How are you guys looking at funds of one?
Mike, we've always done funds of one, okay? Since I can really remember, we've done concentrated deals. We'll obviously look at them a little more carefully. There is perhaps a bit more analysis going into it. But at any given time, we have probably over 20 to 30 different funds of one that we're financing. So it is a big play for us. I tend to think we specialize in it to a certain degree. We don't mind doing them. I think the big thing for us, Mike, is that we're not a transactional bank. What we are is we're a relationship bank. And so if somebody's just bringing the fund of one to us, we kind of expect a little bit of a trade in there, doing something else. So we don't want to do just that. We want to really establish a relationship and do some other transactions with them, as well as other business. But in terms of doing funds of one, I don't think it's an issue. I think it's more, gee, what else are we going to do along with this?
Any predictions on how COVID affects our business going forward?
Wow, that seems like a real wild card. I mean, I think it's affected it significantly right now. But on the other hand, I could say that the business hasn't missed a sort of a heartbeat or a step as we've been going along. I have not been in the office, I guess, since February. And I had left to go on vacation, and I came back home and was told, don't worry about coming in. We'll send you anything you need. And the whole team was dispersed. Interestingly, we'd run sort of similar types of simulations for events such as this. I guess not COVID in particular, but whether it was some sort of disruption in business overall. So we were well prepared for it as an institution. Everybody has laptops, everybody's working from home. So again, I felt like we didn't really miss a heartbeat. Yes, I would say that the first month, the first 2 months, 2.5 months were very long days as we continued to get organized and move forward. But that comes back to sort of what is the disruption, the permanent disruption. I think we will see more people working from home, particularly people who are getting in front of clients on a regular basis and aren't necessarily spending a lot of time in the office. So maybe some of that is pared down, and that's a bit of a changer there. But in terms of how we do business, I don't think business is changing. I'm still getting on the phone each week with our major clients, asking them how things are going, what they're doing, that sort of thing. And that's what I was doing before. I may not be going to lunch or dinner as much, or, those kinds of things. But I think business goes on. You can see it in the fact that many of the funds are raising money right now to take care of opportunities that they see coming up as the market is permanently dislocated, and they'll spend the money, they'll buy things, trade off of other entities, and hopefully deploy the capital that way. And the market will slowly come back into balance.
So Terry, you've been a long-time member of the Funds Finance Association board with me, and I always appreciate your hard work and contribution to the industry there. One of the things, as you know, on our plates is what to do with the Miami conference currently scheduled for March of 21. What are your thoughts on whether that can play through?
Sure, Mike. As you know, we talk about the Miami conference every week on our board meetings, and we talk about all the conferences, frankly. And I think our first thought was, wow, we'll be okay doing this in March. There will be no problem. And I think that has kind of changed gears to, wow, do we need to hedge our bets a little bit and be thinking, it could be later in the year. I think the real key takeaway here is that no matter what, we want to have an in-person conference next year. The Miami conference, formerly the New York conference, is really the global conference for us. It attracts people from all around the world. And as you know, we get attendees that range almost up to 1,000 person. So it's going to be key to keep that going. I believe that we'll get it in place appropriately and at the appropriate time next year. Again, it may not be in March. It would be ideal if it is, but no one really thought we were going to stay away from work till September. And to be honest, I'm now forecasting that we could be staying away from work longer than that. So we will be there. We're looking at different contingencies. I think it's important, and the board thinks it's important to have a physical meeting. So we certainly intend to make that happen.
Great. Well, Terry, really appreciate you taking a couple minutes to visit with us this morning. We'll have you on again soon.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mike, and have a great day.
You too. Great. Well, thanks for watching Industry Conversations. Hope it was productive for you. If we can do anything to improve, please let us know. Have a good weekend.
The material and information contained in the podcast is for general informational purposes only. Any use of the audio within this podcast without the express consent of Cadwalader is prohibited. Quotes from this podcast may not be used without the express permission of the speaker.